Hey, what's up guys? I'm Gordon Briley and I'm going to help you to assemble your PhenoX Xcel system. So this is in my personal gym. I actually had my Xcel system up. I took it down so I could show you guys how to assemble it. It's very simple. You're only going to need a few tools and we're going to go over all that stuff. So let's get started. So we're going to go over the tools that you'll need for this job. I personally have two different drills. I have a power impact with a 3/4 bit, and then I have just a normal power screw drill. So this has a T30 bit that'll come with it, so you'll need that for screwing in the lag screws. There's lag screws and lag bolts. These will help speed up that process. I have here a 7/16 drill bit, and that can be to drill pilot holes for the two lag bolts. You don't necessarily have to do that, but then there's a chance that it could split the wood, the stud that you're screwing into. So doing a pilot hole is a good idea, but if you don't have it, it's probably not the end of the world. And then besides that, I have a 3/4 wrench. So besides the T30 lag screws, all the bolts will be 3/4 inch, and I use a ratcheting socket. Just makes life a lot easier and a lot faster. Tape measure, and that's just going to be to give the distance of where to mount things. So that's a pretty basic tool. Everyone should have that, and a marker or a pencil. But that's really all the tools that you guys are going to need, as long as you have kind of a standard setup where you're going into studs in a wall. So next we're going to go into the individual components and how to start getting these prepared to install. So here we go. So next we're just going to go over quickly some of the components that you'll have. These are the rails. This is where the pulley actually inserts one of them. This is the lower pulley insert. We got the X for the center of the Xcel system. These are the 1/2 inch rail nuts. These are 3/8. The red are the 3/8. These are the lag bolts, the 4-inch lag bolts. These will be for the center of the X and for the for mounting the attachment point for the pulley down low. And we'll go over that in detail. We have some square washers. That's going to be for these eye bolts. Some 3/8 washers, 1/2 inch washers, 2-inch T30 lag screws. These are 1/2 inch bolts, and that's going to be for, we'll go over all these in details. This is the mounting points for your Xcel system where your bands will mount. The pulley itself, your pin, and there is some clips and plastic pieces, but we're going to get into all these. It's detailed instructions one by one, so we'll get to see all these again, but for now, this is just kind of an introduction to some of the pieces that you're going to get started with. Okay, the first thing that you're going to need is a tape measure and a marker. What we're going to do is you have to find a stud in your wall. There's going to be several things that mount to this single stud, so you have to be sure that you found a location that has a stud buried beneath it. That way you have a really solid mounting surface and it can never move. But once you find that stud, this is going to be the center portion of the Xcel. It's only going to expand out from here. So finding the one that's going to work for you is really important. But once we find it, we're going to measure off the floor. We're going to go to 42 inches. Right in the center of that stud, 42 inches, and make a mark. So that mark is where you're going to either drill a pilot hole, and when you drill a pilot hole, you want to go in part of the way, but not deeper than the bolt itself. So just be cautious, know how long that bolt is, and just drill it some, and then it's going to give it essentially a guidance hole for it to go and not split your lumber. So right now we're going to do that, 42 inches to center. Now if you have an obstacle like a screw or something that's in the way, you can move this up or down an inch or so. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's pretty flexible in that way. Or if you have trim that's real high trim, you can mount it slightly higher, slightly lower. You're going to see it's a really flexible system in that way. But a good place to start is 42 inches, and I'm going to show you how to mount this first piece to get started on the Xcel system. So I personally am mounting this back onto the wall, and I already had my holes drilled. So I'm just going to be reusing the holes that are already there. But in this case, you should understand that you're just going to drill that hole first. Then you'll be in the same position that I am. What you're going to need is the X portion. Here is a 4-inch lag bolt, and then a 1/2 inch washer. There's two different washers, 3/8 and 1/2 inch. You're going to need that 1/2 inch. And then there's a nice smooth surface on the X. That's going to be the outside. You're just going to put that bolt through the center. And then with that hole or your mark, like I said, you don't necessarily have to do a pilot hole, but it does help to avoid splitting. You're just going to start to run this in. I like to get it in there some, couple inches. You're going to want to leave some space, so don't tighten it down too much. If you do, just reverse it out a little bit, no big deal. But this is going to be the starting point to start mounting some of the fittings and fixtures to it. So get this done first, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, the next thing you're going to need is one of the rails. So one side is actually going to get one of the plastic fittings. This is just a cap. You put it right in the end. I put it on the ground and just tap them on in there. If they go in there a little bit tough, which that one went right in, they usually do, you can just spin it upside down and just give it a little tap on the floor. It should go right in. And then we're going to go to the other side of the rail, and we have our 1/2 inch rail nuts here. So we just want to make sure that those are centered in the hole. And then we can either slide it in the end. I just slid it right in the end. Or you can put it in the rail and then turn it. There's a certain way you have to turn it, but now we have that portion done. We have the plastic in the one end, plastic covered, and then we have a rail nut on this first side. So now next what we'll need is a 1/2 inch washer, a 1/2 inch by 1 inch bolt, and we're just going to place, I let it sit right on the floor on the long end, and then put it back behind this fitting. Put the 1 inch bolt into the rail nut and just hand tighten it. It should stay right there. Next, just grab the same thing, another rail, put the plastic piece in the end, plastic piece in one end, go to the other end. I'm just going to slide it right on in there. You actually flush these right up and it'll be in just the right place. I got another 1 inch bolt by 1/2 inch, another washer, and then we're just going to place it behind. It doesn't even actually have to line up currently. Just get it in there and we can start to tighten down this one. So now that we have these two bottom ones on and just hanging there for the minute, what we're going to do is actually, with this part right here, we're going to line up the end of the rail right to that. And then I'm going to just make sure that it's straight. Again, the end of the rail comes right across here with this piece and this piece. And then with that 3/4 wrench, I use this ratcheting wrench. I'm going to try to line it up. And if you don't get it perfect, no big deal at all. You're just going to tighten it down and get it to bind down onto the rail and kind of at least get it tight, but not too tight. the next one, we're going to want to have it following this line right across here. So in the shape of the X, I line it up, hold it there, and then I'm just going to tighten this. And again, I only want this rail to go right along to this edge. It's not going to go all the way in. We're going to just meet up with this rail, and then we're going to start to tighten this down. Doesn't have to be super tight. You can tighten everything up, and you can see now it kind of balances itself. It's just hanging on this bolt right here. So we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, next up, we've got the next rail that's going to be installed. Heading upward, again, same thing, slide the rail nut into the end. If you can flush it up, that's great. And then if you have someone to help, it'll be a little bit easier, but if not, still not a big deal. As you can see, I'm doing it alone. Again, 1-inch bolt, 1/2-inch washer. Gonna line it up right across here and just kind of hand tighten it. I actually grab my 3/4 wrench, ratcheting wrench, try to line it up. Get it tight. You might want to rotate a little bit, no big deal. Next one. Same process, just repeating. I'm going to get this last one and it should kind of center itself. Okay, so I put the last rail on. It's going to butt up right against these other ones. And then I'm going to try to get it nice and straight following this edge here. Start to tighten it down, and now we're going to have essentially the X prepared and ready to be bolted on the other end. So the next thing we're going to want to do is actually we're going to increase the depth of this bolt and actually tighten it right down. Get these centered up, and then we'll just tighten this bolt down, and that'll be the next step. So I'm going to use my hammer drill with the 3/4 socket. Just going to tighten this down. Okay. Now this bolt is tight. We're going to move on to the next step. All right, next step, tape measure and marker. Now that we have all 4 of these on here, this one right here is leaning slightly. We're not worried about these top ones right now. We just want to make sure that these bottom 2 are following the lines of this fitting and shooting straight out this way. So what's going to happen is this rail is going to cross over, hopefully a stud here. If you have 16-inch centers, it's going to cross over one here and then another one here. Same thing over here. There should be one stud and then another stud way over here. But we just want to make sure that these are relatively balanced. They're not perfect. It's not a big deal at all. So what we're going to do is make sure they look nice and straight with the X relatively balanced this way and shoot these straight out. What we're going to do is actually take a measurement of the bottom corner of one side. So 8 1/4 is what I have personally. setup, I actually have mine an inch higher, so at 83. So when I say 1.25 inches, yours may be slightly different. So I just want to make sure you know that. And then come to this side, in the bottom corner, measure that. 8.25. Double check it. 8.25. Now that I have these ones straight and balanced at the same height from the floor to the bottom angle, we're on to the next step. All right, the next step, you're gonna need these are called lag screws. This is a 2-inch lag screw. It has a T30 bit, and you'll need a 3/8 washer, which is just gonna go over this. So what we're gonna have to do is, now that we know that this is a stud, we need to find another stud to attach the ends to. So the best case scenario, which this should cross over multiple studs, is you want to leave this rail as open as possible without fasteners within it. So in my situation, I have a stud center here, 16 inches, and the next one is another 16 inches. I can measure off of this one to find the center of this one. Not every house was built perfect, so hopefully in your situation they will be 16-inch centers, but if not, you just got to find the next studs to attach the ends to. So whether you measure it or not, or you already have it figured out, or they're exposed, you're just going to find out where that stud is by measuring over. You're going to take that lag screw. You don't have to pre-drill these ones because they're nice and small diameter. And I like to go wherever that stud is coming down, wherever that cross is, into these slots. That's where you're going to put this lag screw. Now, if you find the situation that it has one of these spots where the slats don't fit perfectly, it's in the way, you can maneuver this rail up or down. It's still going to function exactly the same, but you're just doing what you have to do to make sure that you're getting a screw into that stud. So for me, my hole's right here, the stud's right there, and I'm going to screw the screw through the washer and tighten that down. So now this bottom one is actually nice and solid to the wall. I'm going to grab the next screw and washer. They slide right inside. Again, same scenario where I'm finding two studs over in my situation. And if something was in my way, I can maneuver this one slightly. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I just make the situation work. Same thing, find that stud, and we're going to screw it down. So then the bottom portions are fastened to the wall, and then we're just going to move up to the upper portion next, and then this part will be all secured. Now we're just basically going to do the same thing on the top portion of the Xcel system. So these, as long as you didn't tighten them down really tight, you can still maneuver them to move. That way, if you need to move them just slightly to make sure that you hit your stud appropriately, then you can do that. But once you have your stud, by either measuring a stud finder, however it is that you find your stud, you're going to mark it, and then again, same process, just taking the screw. I already have my hole here. And then locking it down. We're going to move on to the next side, same thing. Now this is where you can also take the tape measure, go from the floor, if you want it perfect, get the measurement to the top corners where I go, come to this other side, and it should match Mine is actually perfect. So we'll take that and we're going to fasten this. And now we have this part of the system secured to the wall, and we can actually go ahead and tighten down all of these bolts so they're nice and secured. Lock them in because this is already ready to go. So on to the next step. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is find what I call the cube. This is where the pulley inserts. So you have pulley here, and this cube fits inside the other one. We just need to mount this to the wall in a place that is going to allow you to have room for this pulley to slide under and fit into it. So there is a bolt underneath. You just have to make sure that this is mounted high enough for this to slide underneath and up and in. So the standard at the bottom for this to fit is minimum of 3 inches. So it needs to be 3 inches or higher, and that's to the bottom side of this. From the floor to the bottom side, you can put a mark at 3 inches. Maybe give yourself just a little bit more clearance, 3 1/4, somewhere around there. It can be slightly higher. That's not that important. If you have a piece of trim, maybe that's here and you need to avoid that, you can mount it slightly higher, not a big deal. So somewhere within this region, again, I already have holes in my wall. And what you're gonna do is take this piece, another 4-inch lag bolt by 1/2 inch with a 1/2 inch washer around it, and you're going to feed it through, like so. Again, you can drill a pilot hole because this is a big lag screw, a 1/2 inch, and it can split your stud. So if you choose to do that, which I would suggest, go ahead and drill, put this minimum of 3 inches to the bottom, and then this bolt is going to go in the upper hole of this cube. So you would want to put the bottom at 3 inches and then mark this upper hole on the wall, and that's where you're going to drill that hole. Or if you're not drilling, just make sure you hit your minimum 3 inches up to the bottom, and then go ahead and put this here, and then we're going to drive this right into the wall. So what's important here is it's tight enough that this cannot rotate, but you don't want to smash it either. Because with a lag bolt, they're super, super powerful. They create a lot of torque, and you could smash this cube, so be really careful not to do that. And now we just want to make sure that this fits inside of it. We have a 1/2 inch pin that will now hold your pulley in place. If it ever spins or swivels on this wall, would just mean that you didn't get it tight enough. But again, do not over tighten this. You can always tighten it down more later. With a drill driver especially, they're really powerful. Just be careful not to smash that. But that's all there is to mounting this bottom portion. So the next thing we're going to do is figure out where we're going to mount. These are the hexagonal, these are the attachment points that your bands actually connect to. So we're going to figure out where these need to be located within the Xcel system. So they will have a 1/2 inch bolt by 1 inch, and then a 1/2 inch washer around them, like so. There's actually a hole. We'll go over this more in a second, but we're just going to find out where these go. This top portion here, this bolt will actually feed right through there like so when it goes to get mounted. But we're going to figure out where to put these first. And this is how we're going to do that. We're going to take the pulley that comes with it, and this is going to be inserted into the piece that you just mounted a minute ago. So the lower pulley attachment, this is going to feed inside of it. The pin goes in the bottom hole, feeds all the way through until it's locked, and then we're just going to pull the cable all the way up. So this is going to be the lowest measurement that you would want to mount the attachment points. So you get this measurement, you can mark it on the wall, measure from the ground to that mark, and then we're going to transfer it over to the side, and I'm going to show you how to mount those. What the goal is here is to establish where you want to mount these, and then you're going to attach the band across and have the other one over there, and that's what the mark that we're making with the cable ending here. We just want to make sure that we're at or above that line. And the reason that you would go higher or lower is how much tension you want to apply to those bands. So it's kind of hard to do this part wrong as long as you get the measurement over there. You could set it lower, but then your band wouldn't engage immediately. It would have a little bit of slack in it, which for some people, you might actually like that. But the good part is, no matter what, this is able to be moved in just a few seconds. So you can kind of customize your band tension determined on where you place these within the rail system. But again, I like to teach it in the beginning to let's mount them above this minimum measurement. We're just going to step over here. We're going to take that measurement that we just got from here and find out where in the center of this rail that measurement lands. And then you can just slide this to the center of that. And in a minute, we can actually determine if we want to move these up or down. So that's not a big deal. So what we want to do is I'm actually going to bring you over here so you can watch. So now that we have the rail nut in here, and again, let me demonstrate that. Rail nut into the rail. Turn it. Now we take that measurement and we're going to mount these. We're going to mount this to where the tab is facing down, the hexagon portion is facing up, but for now we can just get the screw started, the bolt, sorry, get that started in there, and it actually holds itself up there. And we can take that mark, measuring tape, and make sure that we're at least at the top of this, at that minimum mark. That way when you band across, your cable is going to be tensioned right off the very beginning of the lift. So we'll have this one. We don't really have to tighten it yet. We can just get it started. But then we will just move over to this side here. Another 1/2 inch rail nut, put it in, spin it, gonna mount this one, same thing, tab down, go ahead and make the measurement from the floor. Get that minimum. I like to do it to the top of this because this is where I actually hook my bands up, is at the top portion of this hexagon. So I make sure that it's going to be around there. I'll give it a little tighten just to hold itself in place. And then for now, these are actually where they're gonna go. With some slight adjustment once I get some of the other things installed. Okay, on to the next portion to mount. This is the upper pulley attachment point. What we're going to do is actually remove the pulley from the lower attachment, and this with the PX upright will now just go in the top portion. It doesn't go in the bottom at all, but the top portion, and you can pin it through. So now the top is pinned, the ball is hanging out the front and pulled all the way down, and this is how we're going to figure out our actual top mounting point. So with this up here, what we want to do is with the cable extended, we want to let it dangle nice and straight and have it about an inch or two above that bottom piece that you have. So this is going to give us a nice long length of cable that you can fully stretch those bottom bands with. And if you hang it too low, then it's going to hang really low and your tension isn't going to start right away. So ideally, you have it a couple inches above this bottom mount, and then you just simply make a mark, and the bottom one is where I start, and then I will actually screw that and just have it hold it, and then you can put it in the top screw. And remember, these are all into the single stud, the same stud. Now, where it changes a little bit, which is amazing, is you can actually mount this higher. So we kind of have a minimum where that cable ends an inch or two above this bottom one, but we can also, if you're really tall or just want more range, you can mount this higher. That's not a problem whatsoever. So it can be several inches above that, and you can just change the bottom band mounting portion slightly higher or lower depending on what type of resistance you want. So this just has a ton of adjustability kind of to where you, how you want to make it work. It's just learning, getting it set up and kind of start to play with it. But this can be mounted higher. I have mine, because I'm 6'1", I have it mounted quite a bit higher, right about here, and that's about 6 to 8 inches, the cable ending above where I have this mounted currently. So take this cable fully lengthened, make sure it's an inch or two above, and then mark this. All right, so now we're going to actually physically mount this to the wall. All we need is our T30 star bit 2-inch lag screw. Just going to insert it through the bottom portion. This is how I do it. That mark that you made previously on the wall, mine is already pre-drilled, but I'll just start it. I'll start it into that hole, tighten it up, and then this one should hold itself up there. Next lag screw. Tightly secure these to that stud, and then this should be really nice and tight. You don't want to over tighten, you want to strip that hole, so be careful with that. Get it tight, but don't over tighten. And then this piece is mounted, and then all we have to do next is figure out where we're going to mount the bottom band attachment points. So moving on to attaching the bottom band attachment, 1/2-inch bolt, 1 inch and a 1/2-inch washer, the bigger size of the two. Remember, it just fits through the bottom. I'm going to install the pulley into the top portion, pin it, face the pulley forward. The ball should be all the way up into the top part of the pulley, and now we can see how long this cable, how far down it actually goes. So again, we're probably going to want to mount these just below this point. So you could measure an inch or two down from the end of this cable and then take that measurement to the floor, just make a mark, take that measurement, and then you can come over here half-inch rail nut, just slide it in here. So now, this tab, let me bring you over here so you can actually see it. So here, the tab goes into the rail. And now this top portion here of the hexagon is going to be that measurement point. So where you had it here marked on the wall just below this cable is going to be the same measurement that you had here. So once you get that, you can tighten it down slightly. Don't even really need to put much tension on that bolt. But now we're just going to move to this side. And then repeat the process. Washer, mounting point, measurement to the top of this. You'll see in a second here that this isn't really all that important to have it super precise. It's more about where you want to feel that tension. So let's go over that next. All right, so now you're going to want to find your spring clips, spring hooks, attach one to the end, and then one on the other end of the pulley through the eyelets. And then once we have these on, we're going to take one of our bands here, and then we're going to just go through and hook onto the bottom portion of this hexagon, string it across into the other bottom portion of this hexagon. So what we'll see here with this band being strung across, it's right about at the same height as the band is stretched across. And then with this D-ring that it attaches to, all we're going to do is hook a ring up to these hooks that we just installed. And now basically your unit is set up. What you can do is decide if you want to pre-tension your bands a little bit. If you're a novice, I wouldn't worry about this too much. Maybe just mount it where they're nice and even, and don't worry about pre-tensioning. It's just a little more advanced. But what you can do if you want more tension to start off is actually lower these down, put these lower, they'll slide. If you run into your hardware, you may have to pull this off and just move it to the other side of the lag screw that you put in earlier, but that's really small, so it's not much of an obstacle. But if that's the case, so you can lower this side, lower that side, and have it to where this is lower right at the start, and then you're pre-tensioning that band a bit. So this is how you find out with that top pulley installed, the cable draped. You just want to make sure that there is really relatively straight across. So you can lower these, or if you had to or wanted to, you could actually move the top portion up slightly higher to allow for some of that pre-tension. So that can be moved. Once you put it up there and you have to move it, it's not that big of a deal. Just take the screws out, move it, adjust it, and then add some of that pre-tension. If you like how it feels right where it's at, use the measurements from this. And the reason that you did a couple inches below this is because of this hook. But now, if that's where you like it, we're just going to tighten these bolts down real tight. And those nuts will actually lock down onto the rail system, and you should never be able to move if you get these nice and tight. So now we have the bottom band mounted, and it's right where it needs to be. So now we can just flip the pulley again, and we're just going to check the top tension to see if that's where we want it. Okay, so we will unhook this. Take the pulley out. Mount it into the bottom. We're just going to string this across so we can see that, again, that is mounted just higher than this hook. We'll take another band. Now, instead of hooking it to the bottom, we hook it to the top. And then string it across, hook it to the other top, and then we look under tension here. So there's a little bit of sag in this line here. So when you pull this, there's a little bit of sag there. You can just move these higher because I want to have tension right off the bat for me personally. So I would slide this up. Slide this up. You know, we'll get rid of some of that slack. And now my band is nice and tight, nice and tensioned. And then we'll tighten these bolts down nice and tight, just like we did the bottom. And then we're ready to actually start installing our other bands. On the final touches, we're actually just going to put this plastic cap into the top of this piece right here, just to make it look good. Just press it right in the top, and you're good to go. Next up, we're going to install the attachment points. There will be 4 of them, so you need an eye bolt, a flat washer, a round washer. This is 3/8, this is a small version, and this is a rail nut that is 3/8. It's red instead of blue. Blue is the 1/2 inch. So what we're going to do is we're going to put 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this will give us a lot of different attachment points that are highly adjustable. And all we're going to do is same rail nuts, just different size. You turn them, and then you're going to take eye bolt, put the washer, and then put the eye bolt inside the big washer, the square one. Put it in the rail. Tighten it up, and then this is able to slide very quickly up and down to different attachment points. I'm only going to do 2 real quick, just so you can see. Again, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. You'll be able to have quick setup points all over. So eye bolt into round washer, into square washer, twist on, so when you go to use these, it's just a quick small turn, slide anywhere you want, and then tighten. And then in the next video, the how to use the Xcel system is going to be a better explanation of different ways to set things up, how to use the different handles, all those things. So we're almost there. So the last thing in the install is actually going to be putting our other bands onto the system. I like to make sure, just go through, make sure that all the bolts are tight. You can really kind of wrench down on these ones to make sure that they're really biting down into that rail. But just go through and make sure everything's nice and tight. And then you're going to place your other bands, whatever you have. What I like to do is make matching. So if 15 and a 30, I'll match down here 15 and a 30. But we're going to go over that stuff, where to put your bands, how many bands, stuff like that, and how to use the Xcel system.